Great to be out here down in Victoria for a launch of something pretty special. You know, I was thinking about it over the last 30 years, you know, I've been testing bikes, and really they've been Japanese bikes or European bikes. You know, so I think what's been really special about the last couple of days is the opportunity to test a British manufacturer, Triumph, been around since 1902, storied, iconic brand, you know, but largely focused on the road and adventure segments. As you'll know, you probably will have seen the Triumph a year ago brought out some motocross bikes. They've done particularly well on them too, both in America, you know, in Europe and in Australia. But what the really interesting thing is that while we all got our head around those motocross bikes now, and they've sort of hit the ground, Triumph's hit the ground running with them, they've just released two enduro models. So 250 and 450, the TF250-E and TF450-E. And we've been down here at Star Glen Lodge, which is a couple of hours on the foothills of the Victorian High Country, and an amazing 500 acres here, and had the opportunity to test these two bikes. So I guess the big questions for me coming into it were twofold, and that is, like, we know, you know, the motocross bikes are a known quantity. You know, they're no compromise. They've done particularly well, already sort of, you know, racked up quite a bit of success, like in, you know, as I said, in America and Europe and some other countries around the world where the, you know, the bikes have been just embedded into championships. So the big questions for me for these enduro bikes is, where do they fit into the existing offerings on the market? You know, obviously what sort of component spec that the brand's gone for, what its design philosophy is. And then I guess the other sort of part of that is, you know, how have they taken their existing motocross bike and adapted it for enduro purposes? So let's, I guess, sort of take those two propositions, those two questions, sort of one step at a time. So how do they fit into the existing market? Okay, so, well, you know, when you look around the bike, it's nothing crazy. Like, yes, it's a completely new offering and Triumph's first enduro bike. But, you know, you look at the things and you sort of go, like, things look familiar. You know, you kind of go, okay, I want to say LA frame. I'm thinking sort of Yamaha, but it's got a sort of KTM shape. The tanks sort of KTM or Husky S. You know, the shrouds look a bit Sherco and the rear guard look a bit Sherco-like. Kayaba suspension. Yamaha, Sherco, some of the high-end beaters. You know, Brembo brakes and clutch. All these sort of things, you know, it's nothing novel in terms of it's nothing like crazy, you know, left field in terms of its offering. But as Triumph's marketing manager said, like, you're cooking with good ingredients. So I guess the real question is, you know, how have the bikes been cooked? How have they put those things together? The other, I think, let's also talk about the other point, and that is, you know, how they've differentiated from motocross bikes. You know, you'll always have people who are sort of cynics and just sort of say, like, oh yeah, they're just taking their motocross bikes, putting an 18-inch rear, 6-speed gearbox and a headlight on the things, and then they're done with it, right? But it was very interesting that we had a tech presentation last night. We also had the guys, you know, from HQ over in the UK, the product, you know, product development team, sort of talking about that. And it's really interesting to see what they've done. So look, you know, rather than going through all the nitty-gritty of that now, I guess let's take out the essence of it. What have they done? Well, same componentry, obviously gone to a bigger tank, 6-speed box, 18-inch rear, headlight. But the big thing, I think, is that they found that they rocked the chassis forward. So they have 10mm less suspension travel, just to sit it forward. Because actually, interestingly enough, they've gone up on the shock rate as well, on the spring rate. And they've gone, really importantly, 10mm longer on the swing arm. Might not sound like a lot, but for a swing arm, that's pretty significant. So, and in terms of the riding experience, you know, so I guess I went out there today and just sort of said, okay, that looks like a motocross bike. It's got some, you know, it's been enduro-ized. I understand all the bits and pieces that they've done to it, but how's it going to feel? Is it going to feel like an enduro bike? And to be fair, you know, some of the stuff we tested on today, you know, we had everything from fire trail to really snotty single trail to really rocky, shaly stuff. To slippery routes, you know, to big erosion mounds. So fair to say it was a really comprehensive way of being able to sort of test these bikes. First thing I noticed was like, this does not feel like a motocross bike adapted to the bush. The first thing I noticed was how compliant it was. So just, you know, powering up a little hill, third, fourth gear, it's like, you know, where you kind of like don't know whether the kind of stuff where you're like, oh, if I hit this any harder, I'm going to get a flat tire, that sort of sharp edge stuff. Where if you're going to have a bike deflecting with the sort of motocross DNA, I guess, that's where it's going to happen. In fact, on the contrary, these things were super compliant, super plush. And I thought that was really interesting. And note to myself, literally on the first, you know, couple of minutes of riding it, this feels like not an adaptive motocross bike, but an enduro bike from the sort of ground up. Its whole DNA felt, you know, felt very enduro. So I think, you know, so that compliance I was talking about then was, you know, really significant. And I think that sort of lays the foundation. And you go back to when, you know, what you look at what Triumph's tried to do in terms of the design philosophy. So they've tried to make it lightweight. It's pretty much on par with the lightest hard-nosed enduro bikes in the class. They've also talked a lot about the agility of the bike, slow speed agility, hence what I talked about before, rocking the chassis forward, putting some weight over the front, really giving it that agility, but maintaining that high-speed stability, which you need for sort of, you know, for confidence when you're out on snotty trails and you're hitting hard edge stuff. So I think they've done a bloody good job, because whether you're riding, you know, the 250 or the 450, I think that really stands out. Obviously being lightweight helps with agility, but in terms of the engine, gyro, all those things, I think that really, well, they certainly ticked a design philosophy box there. In terms of the ergos, nothing crazy. You know, it's like I said before, in terms of the components, they're nothing crazy new, but they've been put together in a way that's not going to feel foreign for anybody. It's not like, you know, it's going to feel like left field. So, you know, it was sort of like very comfortable. As I said, you know, we're knowing Brembo brakes, Brembo clutch. It was a really, really comfortable ride. The other really significant thing I think that came out of it for me was when you're comparing the motocross bike to the enduro bikes was the increase in inertia. So the engine inertia. So 30 and 34%, I think, for the 250 and 450, I think the other way around. Anyway, let's call another 30% of engine inertia, you know, through the crank. And that made a huge difference. So I think pretty much what I felt today and what I heard everybody talking about today is how tractable these things were, how easy it was to get them hooking up in a way that was super confidence inspiring. Gives you a really good connection between your throttle, you know, and the rear wheel. Aided, of course, by the electronics, you know, and you know, we've got you know, there's a traction control, there's a launch control, there's a couple of maps, and you've got quick shifter on here as well. So pretty comprehensive electronics suite of rider aids on the thing that make a big difference as well. I would think if there's one thing that biggest takeout from me, coming back to the engines, was, you know, the 250, because the torque on the thing is something special. You know, I think if you've got a Yamaha, which is a sort of revs to 13.5 at one end of the spectrum on the 250F Enduro side of it, and then the European bikes, which are typically more torquey out of the box, this is that and more. Like I kept saying today, my God, you know, with this resonating chamber, it sounded like a 300, but it also performed like one as well. Now, I don't know whether there's a little bit of, you know, psychological effect there, but I tested it today, literally going up hills, almost just a jogging pace, dumping the clutch, and it chugged up and absolutely refused to fall off. So the chuggability of this 250 was something, like I say, in 30 years of testing bikes, it's pretty remarkable. In a lot of ways, it sounds, feels, and performs like a 300. And I think that was pretty damn special. Like I say, that was probably the biggest standout for me, you know, for the last couple of days testing these things. I think that differentiates the TF250-E more from the other 250s on the market than it does, you know, than the 450 is differentiated from the other offerings on the market. So yeah, that was a huge takeout. And just coming back to, I guess, the comment I was saying, you know, before about one of the boys saying, you know, you're cooking with good ingredients. When you look at these bikes and what you get, value for money. Okay, Kyber suspension, both ends. Brembo clutch and brake. Galfa disc. You know, DID Dirt Star rims. You know, Koenig piston. You know, Del West valves. God, I've probably forgotten some bits and pieces here as well, but Athena engine management system. But basically the components that they put together on this thing is they haven't cut any corners. And I think, you know, reading some of the PR guff, it's no compromise is something that sort of kept coming up again and again. And I think in the development process, which is obviously used, you know, from Ricky Carmichael to Ivan Cervantes to Paul, you know, Paul Edmondson, you know, 5- and 4-time world enduro champions respectively, it's paid dividends in these bikes in terms of, you know, how they've put all those elements together in a harmonious way and cooked a damn good dish. So I guess you can't talk about food or anything edible until you talk about the price of the thing. So 250s, 17,600 give or take, a special introductory price. 450, about 19,000. So where's that put it? So that's sort of a little above the sort of beaters, Yamaha's gases of the world. Pretty much on a par with where KTM is for like for the 250F and 450F. A little bit under at the moment where I guess the, you know, the Husky and the sort of Sherco with the Kaiba suspension is. So, and in a way, you've got to be careful making those comparisons because that's comparing the 26 prices on these things with the 25 model prices on those other bikes. So, but you know, it's been a really fascinating couple of days. I think the takeouts for me is that these guys have hit the ground running. They're very serious. They're going to be around for a long time. For me, it's great actually to have, we've got a couple of cookers going off in the background there. For me, it's actually great to have another, you know, somebody else coming into the enduro class and actually, you know, keeping everybody honest because these things are a really serious offering. I think they're priced in a way that is going to make people sit up and think. You know, I think that in terms of their dealer support and backup and the, you know, the marketing behind the things, and if you look at what they've done on the motocross, you know, market already in terms of their racing success. You know, I think they've got a pretty promising future ahead of them. So look, really good opportunity for the last couple of days to be testing these things. Looking forward to getting some more. Would love to think that they're going to, there was a lot of talk about, you know, these guys expanding their model range in the coming years, but I think at the moment it's pretty obvious that they're going to be just focusing on the 250 and 450. But, you know, I think all told, Triumph's done a bloody good job with these things, and I think people are going to be very impressed with them, with the things that are reasonably priced and about the dealer floors.